Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. Many Canadian premiers arrive in Washington for an anti-tariff lobbying campaign. Political columnist Brian Lilley joins us from the U.S. Capitol to discuss Premier Smith's and Ford's tactical approach while in D.C. And U.S. President Donald Trump warns Hamas if all remaining hostages aren't released by Saturday, Israel should, quote, let hell break out.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Thanks so much for joining us. The Liberal government has named a former senior Mountie to be the federal point person on fighting the spread of deadly fentanyl. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Kevin Brozo's role as fentanyl czar will involve working closely with U.S. counterparts to accelerate Canada's efforts to detect, disrupt, and dismantle the illicit trade of the drug. U.S. President Donald Trump recently threatened to impose steep tariffs on all goods from Canada, citing the southbound flow of migrants and drugs, including fentanyl. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is promising a firm and clear response to U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs. Trudeau says Trump's executive order to implement 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminum imports into the U.S. starting next month is unacceptable. The Prime Minister says this will hurt both countries, and he has spoken with U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance about the impact steel tariffs would have.
Tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum would be entirely unjustified. We are the U.S.'s closest ally. Our economies are integrated. Canadian steel and aluminum is used in a number of key American industries, whether it's defense, shipbuilding, manufacturing, energy, automotive. Together we make North America more competitive. We will be working with the American administration over the coming weeks to highlight the negative impacts on Americans and Canadians of these unacceptable tariffs. But we'll also be working with our international partners and friends. And if it comes to that, our response, of course, will be firm and clear.
Alberta Premier Danielle Smith will be embracing a Team Canada approach to convince Americans Donald Trump's threatened tariffs will harm workers and businesses on both sides of the border. She is among Canada's provincial and territorial leaders traveling back to Washington, D.C. today to lobby U.S. lawmakers and industry over the threats by Trump. And Toronto Sun columnist and BCN contributor Brian Lilley is also in Washington, D.C. today, reporting on the Premier's anti-tariff campaign, which is planned to fully kick into action on Wednesday.
We do know that they're going to be meeting with some senators, some congresspeople. Premier Ford's office has put out a list of who he's meeting. Eby couldn't say. Premier Smith's office did not put out a full list. So I think some of it's fluid. And I also think that they don't want to say who they're going to meet with until they've met with them because, Canada doesn't factor in an awful lot in Washington. It's hard to get meetings, and it's easy to get them canceled.
Brian also shares more about Prime Minister Trudeau's audio leak and if Trump really wants to make Canada the 51st state. That is all coming up later on in the program. Ontario Premier Doug Ford says the world is watching the trade dispute between Canada and the United States and that China is sitting back and laughing. He told U.S. Chamber of Commerce today that he's heard serious concerns from U.S. lawmakers about how China is hijacking global supply chains. Ford says decoupling the U.S. economy from China will not be an easy task, and it will require friends and allies like Canada and Ontario.
Working together, Canada and the U.S. can be the richest, most successful, safest, most secure two countries on the entire planet when we're working together. We can usher in a new American-Canadian century, what President Trump calls new golden age. We do so by building Fortress AMCAN. Fortress AMCAN is a renewed alliance between America and Canada that's a beacon of stability, security, and long-term economic growth on both sides of the border. First, Fortress AMCAN promotes free, fair, and balanced trade. Fair trade means fighting back against freeloaders that rip off workers by taking advantage of free trade agreements designed to protect jobs at home. I'm talking about China.
He's making his pitch for Canada and the U.S. to work together in an effort to convince President Donald Trump to drop his tariff threats. In other news, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has ordered his army to beef up troops in and around the Gaza Strip. An Israeli officer says Netanyahu has also ordered authorities to prepare for every scenario if Hamas doesn't release hostages this Saturday as part of a ceasefire deal. Hamas has threatened to call off the scheduled hostage release after accusing Israel of violating their fragile deal. It says Israel has delayed allowing displaced Palestinians to return to northern Gaza, has targeted them with airstrikes, and failed to facilitate the entry of humanitarian aid as agreed. President Trump, meantime, says if Hamas doesn't release all the remaining hostages on Saturday, then Israel should, quote, let hell break out.
I'd say they ought to be returned by 12 o'clock on Saturday, and if they're not returned, all of them, not in drips and drabs, not 2 and 1 and 3 and 4 and 2. Saturday at 12 o'clock, and after that, I would say all hell is going to break out.
Today, President Trump is hosting Jordan's King Abdullah II at the White House as he escalates pressure on the Arab nation to take in refugees from Gaza, perhaps permanently, as part of his bold plan to remake the Middle East. Also in Washington, U.S. House of Representatives Speaker Mike Johnson said Tuesday he wholeheartedly agrees with Vice President J.D. Vance that courts should not try to control the president's power as Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, program slashes through the federal government.
What we're doing is good and right for the American people. What DOGE is doing is making sure that your taxpayer dollars, all of us, are spent in the way that they're intended to be spent, and that they're in America's interest, and they're financially responsible with the precious taxpayers' money. We have a $36 trillion federal debt, and we have got to get a hold of these things. When you're making big change, it ruffles some feathers. But this is positive change, it's good change for the country, and we're excited to be a part of it. So.
Here in the prairies, RCMP have released the names of 2 men and 2 women killed last week on a First Nation in southern Saskatchewan in order to help in their investigation. The dead include Tracy Hotomani, who was 34, and Terry Jack, who was 51, both of Carry the Kettle Nakota Nation. The others are 47-year-old Shauna Fay of Indian Head and 44-year-old Sheldon Cusans of Kagamai, Anishinaabeg. Police say the 4 were found with gunshot wounds in a home on Carry the Kettle Nakota Nation east of Regina. No arrests have yet been made in relation to the deaths of the 4 victims. A Winnipeg man is being charged after an attempted knife attack on a church pastor during an evening service. Police say officers responded to a report of a man disrupting a church service in the city's north end on Sunday and alleged the 50-year-old man charged towards a 38-year-old pastor at the altar with a knife. The pastor escaped without injuries, and the man was detained by an off-duty RCMP officer. Winnipeg police say the man is facing 3 charges, including assault with a weapon and possession of a weapon. An American murderer wanted by authorities in the United States and Mexico had been living here in southern Alberta for nearly 50 years without being found by police. Our BCN's Heidi Echeverria has this mysterious story.
Well, I just think everyone was totally surprised. Like, there was no indication whatsoever from, our interactions with who we knew as Deidre Glabus, actually, that she didn't have any criminal behavior here that we were aware of.
This was the shock reaction of those who knew Dee Glabus when they received the news that the kind and helpful woman was really Sharon Kinney, an American criminal and fugitive who killed 3 people in the United States and in Mexico between 1960 and 1964.
On September 18th, 1964, She shot and killed a man in a Mexico City hotel room and was arrested for the murder.
La Pistolera, which translates as the gunslinger, as she was known in Mexico for the 1964 murder of Francisco Ordóñez, had murdered her first husband, 25 years old James Kinney, in March 1960, and 2 months later, she also killed Patricia Jones, her lover's wife.
Thanks to a courageous tip from a concerned individual, Sharon Kinney had been living under an assumed name in Alberta, Canada.
April 18th of 2024, we were contacted to inquire about if we had any knowledge about an individual residing in our community who they believed was here under a false name. As a result, we started our investigation. We ended up touching base at the end of the day with our local funeral home, found out that actually this individual that we were looking for was deceased 2 years previously, but the funeral home had actually taken a fingerprint. I was able to request the print, but unfortunately, due to our privacy laws, I wasn't able to get a copy of the print. I went through a bunch of legal means and asked a bunch of prosecutors whether or not I was going to be able to do this legally in Canada, and the answer was no. I decided to have a look at the company that actually stores the fingerprints. And when I did that, I contacted the investigator. They got an administrative subpoena legally in the United States and obtained the fingerprint image. And the FBI confirmed very quickly that actually the person that we had living in our community was Sharon Kine.
May 31st, 2024, exactly to the day, 64 years after our initial arrest. We were able to confirm with the FBI that the fingerprints obtained throughout our investigation were compared to the initial arrest fingerprints made in 1960 and confirmed that Deidre Glavis was indeed Sharon Kinney and had been living in Alberta, Canada.
I knew her for many, many years. She worked as a night clerk at the Heritage Inn and had many interactions with her. All the documents that she would have had in Canada, including her driver's license, social insurance number, were valid.
Sharon was a woman that never faced the consequences of her actions, leaving them for her children to deal with. She caused great harm without thought or remorse.
Just too bad that the information came out 2 years after she passed away. It would have been nice to hear it earlier so that there could have been justice for the victims as well as some closure for some families.
According to investigations, Kinney moved to Taber, Alberta in 1973, seeking a quiet life while on the run from authorities. She married several times, worked as a real estate agent, and volunteered at the food bank baking banana bread. According to acquaintances from Taber Senior Center, Kinney loved to play bridge, a card game, every Thursday at 1:30 p.m. With her death at the age of 81, a story that seemed straight out of a horror movie with a double life full of secrets has come to the end. For Bridge City News, I'm Heidi Echavarria.
Incredible. Thank you for that, Heidi. Well, events like floods and fires happen when we least expect them, so it's important to learn about emergency social services. The City of Lethbridge is inviting the community to join the ESS to support their community during emergencies. Jamie Anderson, Emergency Planning Administrator for the City of Lethbridge, explains why the city is holding training about emergency planning preparedness.
The City of Lethbridge takes emergency planning and preparedness very seriously and has a number of plans ready to activate. One of those pieces being our emergency social services response, which is the basic response to evacuees from other communities or should people be unable to remain in their homes during an event in our community, how are we caring for those people? And as we've seen through the last couple of years, we saw Jasper fires last year and we've seen fires in California. Having a plan to prepare to support people at that time of need makes a huge difference in the overall response of the event itself. So one of the things that we're doing is we have an emergency social services team and are looking to broaden it to include community members.
For more information about the ESS program and how to join the team, visit lethbridge.ca/ESS. One of the development companies for the proposed Lethbridge 2 and 3 solar facilities has said they are thrilled after the Alberta Utilities Commission approved the development of the combined solar field. The two project owners, New E Power, along with Low Carbon Canada Limited, plan to build the combined project in private land just southwest of the Lethbridge Airport. The project aims to develop 157 megawatts of electricity and offset over 138,000 tons of carbon. The news comes after the Lethbridge 1 solar project recently went into commercial production on the 31st of January, which holds a power capacity of 9 megawatts. The project is expected to begin construction this year and begin operation in 2027. A Juno Award-winning musician will be speaking at Lethbridge Polytechnic next month to host a fireside chat on artificial intelligence. David Usher, a member of the band Moist, founded Reimagine AI, which builds interactive AI-powered virtual beings for entertainment and healthcare purposes. He will headline the school's speaker series, which, thanks to a local donor, Bruce McKillop, has made its return since being shut down during the COVID-19 pandemic.
I'm excited about this because obviously he's going to bring all his musical background, first of all, and then he has a real passion himself for AI. I'm really hoping it's going to be well attended. I'm really excited that we're trying to revitalize the speaker series.
The speaker series is scheduled to take place on March 12th at 6 p.m. Tickets can be found on the Polytechnic's website. The Coaldale and District Soccer Association has provided the town's Shift Recreation Center with a $50,000 donation. The town says the donation, as part of the Coaldale Strong initiative, will help with more indoor programs and further cement more soccer opportunities in the region, as the Shift Center features a full-sized indoor soccer turf.
The association itself has been involved in working with the town for quite some time to provide soccer. Now with the new Shift Community Recreation Center being built and opened earlier this year in June, there's the opportunity to actually have an indoor program. And this group has taken that bull by the horn, so to speak, and has developed quite a substantial indoor program right here in Coaldale. Their donation, along with a number of other donations, ensured that we could be a little bit more unique than a lot of other indoor soccer facilities, where we did go wider so that we could have an unboarded field and play that style of soccer that doesn't exist in southern Alberta right now.
Pretty cool. The Shift Rec Center opened back in June of 2024. Well, Prince Harry and his wife Meghan, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, took part in the Whistler, BC welcoming ceremony for the Invictus Games. Harry told the crowd it was a historic moment, as this year's games are the first to feature adaptive winter sports, including alpine and cross-country skiing, snowboarding, biathlon, and skeleton. And speaking of games, I'm sure by now you've heard all about the big blowout that took place in New Orleans over the weekend on Sunday there. Eagles fans erupted in cheers, and some of them in tears of joy, I'm assuming, at a watch party in Philadelphia after their Eagles denied the Kansas City Chiefs a Super Bowl three-peat with dominant defense in a 40-22 defeat.
We had high hopes. It's my birthday, so we had high hopes. We knew what Saquon was going to bring. We knew what Hurts was going to bring, and we were ready for it.
Well, they were ready for it, but I don't think we were ready for such a low-scoring game, at least the first half of it. By the way, for the first time in history, a U.S. president actually attended that game. Little interesting fact there. Well, we need to take a quick break, but when we return, I'll have some weather details for you. And here's a sneak peek. You're going to want to stay bundled up for most of the week. Welcome back. Well, some more scattered flurries expected this evening with winds from 20 to 40 kilometers per hour, and those winds sticking around until tomorrow, but the clouds should clear up, giving us nice sunny skies. Also a daytime high of -10, which puts us back into that seasonal range. However, we're not out of the woods. You still need to bundle up because of the risk of frostbite. So the wind chill values in the morning are going to feel like -32. So as we get into Thursday, -13 for the high, -20 3 on Friday, so it's just getting colder. Those periods of snow could return on Friday, then clear skies on Saturday, -14. Mainly cloudy skies on Sunday with a high of -2. That is more like it. And then those flurries returning Sunday night into Monday, high of -9 as we get into Monday for that 7-day forecast. So average high for this time of year, 1 degree, average low -11. 16 was our record high on this day, happening back in 2005. And in 2021, not all that long ago, we saw the record low, -32. Sun rose this morning at 7:49, sunset this evening at 5:44, giving us 9 hours, 45 minutes of daylight. Okay, as we look to the west coast tomorrow, mainly sunny skies in Victoria, high of 2 degrees, 2 in Vancouver, but there is an Arctic outflow warning in effect for this evening. As we look to Edmonton, there are periods of light snow and then lightening up a little bit, -15 for the daytime high, -10 in Calgary with clear skies. Just keep in mind that risk of frostbite. As we look to Manitoba and Saskatchewan, we're seeing extreme cold warning in effect. Wind chill value is going to be very, very cold and risk of frostbite in minutes. So Saskatoon daytime high, -14, -24 rather. Same thing for Regina, -20 the daytime high there in Winnipeg. As we look to the central part of the country there, we could see periods of freezing rain and ice pellets and 2 centimeters of flurries in Toronto tomorrow, -3 for the daytime high, -10 in Ottawa, -11 in Montreal. Both of those cities seeing winter storm warnings beginning by the evening and going into Thursday. Now, same with these cities. Beautiful clear skies all the way around, -7 tomorrow, -4 in Halifax, -10 in Charlottetown. But winter weather expected to begin Thursday. -8 for the daytime high tomorrow in St. John's with clear skies there. So there you have it. That is your forecast. New research shows that Calgary, St. John, New Brunswick, and Windsor, Ontario are the Canadian cities that would be hit hardest by U.S. tariffs. The Canadian Chamber of Commerce used Stats Canada data to come up with a U.S. tariff exposure index to look at the potential impact of threatened American tariffs on 41 Canadian cities. It found that cities that export more goods to the United States as a share of their local economies are more likely to suffer from the levies. Here in Lethbridge, over $2 billion in goods that account for over 91% of exports make its way to the states. The report shows that Lethbridge would be very susceptible to the tariffs, as many exports, primarily in our agriculture, will be impacted. Canadian cities that have less to fear from tariffs include those on the coasts like Victoria and Halifax, because they export more to Asia or Europe. The president of BC-based Helijet International says a friendship with a Ukrainian family is key in a decision to donate a fully operational medical helicopter to the war-torn country. Helijet's Danny Sitnam says he's been an ardent supporter of the Ukraine since its war with Russia's invading forces began in February of 2022.
Today marks a very special day. It's been about a year of culmination of putting a program together where Helijet will be donating this Sikorsky S-76 helicopter to the Ukrainian communities for the purposes of supporting humanitarian air medical support.
My personal desire and my family, we and our company as well, we have a tendency to give back quite a bit to communities. And so there's a giving back feeling about, we've got so much, what can we give back to support other communities that don't have as much as we do? And whether that's in healthcare or in this case in a humanitarian effort. It's a real solid aircraft, very reliable, can carry quite a bit of payload. It's very convertible, and what I mean by that is it can move passengers, it can move cargo, it can obviously fit in a stretcher system to carry patients and so forth. So it's a very versatile helicopter, very fast and very mobile.
The helicopter will be transported to Kyiv and is expected to be put into use by March the 15th. Movie theater company Cineplex has reported a fourth quarter profit of $3.3 million. That's compared with a loss of $9 million a year earlier. As more moviegoers hit the theaters, Cineplex's revenue rose 15% to more than $362 million. It also says its box office revenue last month stayed about the same compared to a year ago, totaling $37.5 million. Now here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was down 27 basis points to 25,631. The Dow was up 123 points to 44,593. The S&P 500 was up 2 points to 6,068, and the Nasdaq was down 70 points to 19,643. West Texas Intermediate oil was up 88 cents to 73.20 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 6 cents to 3.50 US. Gold was down 20.46 to 28.97.17 US an ounce, and silver was down 23 cents to 31.82 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.57 per bushel, barley is at $6.57, canola is at $15.08, and corn is at $8.58 per bushel. Live cattle February contract was down $2.20 to $199.68. Feeder cattle March contract was down $3.35 to $264.78, and lean hogs February contract was up $103 to $88.73. And the Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours and currently sits at 70 cents US.
Recapping one of our top stories, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is promising a firm and clear response to U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs. Trudeau says Trump's executive order to implement 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminum imports into the United States starting next month is, quote, unacceptable. The Prime Minister says this will hurt both countries, and he has spoken with U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance about the impact steel tariffs would have. Coming up after the break, Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley joins us from Washington, D.C., where he is covering the Premier's anti-tariff campaign. And he'll also tell us why he thinks Trump really does want to make Canada the 51st state. Also, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. You can also visit our website or our YouTube page anytime to check out more of our stories and interviews. Well, all of Canada's premiers are in Washington, D.C. today, or at least headed there. And that's where we're also finding Brian Lilley, political columnist for the Toronto Sun, who is joining me now to talk about what's going on there. So, Brian, first off, thanks for joining us from Washington today. Great to have you back on. And I understand the goal of this trip with the premiers is basically an anti-tariff lobbying campaign?
Yep. So they're all just trying to get in front of as many people as they can to try and make the point that these tariffs are bad for Canada, but they're also bad for the United States. Now, the one person that they really need to talk to, I don't think they'll be getting a meeting with, and that's U.S. President Donald Trump. Of course, Trump is committed to the idea of tariffs. Many of the people around him are committed to the idea of tariffs, but still the premiers felt it's important to come down to meet with business leaders. There's going to be a reception later today hosted by a senator in the Library of Congress, lots of people coming around for that. And so they want to get in front of people who have influence in Washington, whether they be Republican or Democrat or from the business community, to make Canada's case. So Premier Doug Ford was at an event earlier today speaking to the American Chamber of Commerce. You've got Premier Smith is already in town. I haven't seen her yet. Nova Scotia Premier Tim Houston wandering around the hallways of the hotel in the lobby. So they're all gathering here to try and show a unified voice, unified message at a time when there really isn't leadership from the federal level. You know, the Prime Minister right now, as these tariffs are coming, he's in Paris.
Yeah, not in Washington, where he probably should be. Yeah, okay. Now, you mentioned Danielle Smith, so Alberta Premier. She'll be part of this reception at the Library of Congress today, hosted by Republican Senator Kevin Kramer of North Dakota. So Premier Doug Ford, you're saying, meanwhile, just spoke to the Chamber of Commerce. So what is all of their messaging going to be? Have you really heard, kind of dug into what it is and sort of what the reception is from their U.S. counterparts?
Well, interesting reception today. There was a crowd of about 150 people at Ford's event with the Chamber of Commerce, a mixture of Canadian business leaders and American business leaders, because in addition to the premiers, there's a bunch of people who represent trade associations and provincial or national chambers of commerce have also come to Washington for these meetings to try and it's basically a full court press. So Premier Ford's messaging at that event was all about, hey, look, we're stronger when we're together, and the real problem is China. So let's work together to beat back China. It was Ford has made that messaging before, but it was interesting to hear it laid out in a full speech aimed at an American audience, because that's something that might break through with Donald Trump. Everything that he's doing, from the Panama Canal to Greenland to tariffs to altering trade, is about countering China. China is trying to take over as the world superpower. They're trying to take over as the dominant economy, and Trump wants to make sure that the United States comes out on top. A lot of people will look at all these different things and say, none of this makes sense. It does when you look at it through the lens of China. You can agree or disagree with his actions, but everything he's doing is based on China. So smart messaging from Premier Ford on that front. Is it going to work? Again, there's an audience of one for this. At some point, somebody's got to get to Trump. One business leader who was there in the audience told reporters afterwards that when that might happen is we might have to feel the pain first of the tariffs, and the American people may need to feel the pain of the tariffs before Trump says, okay. So, a lot going on and a lot of messaging, a lot of politicking. That's what you do when you're in Washington, D.C., though.
Oh, absolutely. And the official program for the Council of the Federation starts Wednesday. So what are the plans there, Brian?
Premiers are getting together for a photo op early in the morning, a working breakfast, then it's off to meetings in and around Capitol Hill. Exactly who they're going to be seeing, Premier Eby in British Columbia was asked about that yesterday. He said, well, things are up in the air. Look, to be honest, we do know that they're going to be meeting with some senators, some Congress people. Premier Ford's office has put out a list of who he's meeting. Eby couldn't say. Premier Smith's office did not put out a full list. So I think some of it's fluid. And I also think that they don't want to say who they're going to meet with until they've met with them, because, Canada doesn't factor in an awful lot in Washington. It's hard to get meetings, and it's easy to get them canceled. So some of this is going on in the background. But I'll tell you this, as much as people don't normally talk about Canada in the American capital, and that's my experience from when I've been down here or called down to interview people, Canada's being talked about a lot in the media, and not just more progressive or left-wing media that are saying, oh, look at how evil and awful Donald Trump is to Canada, but also in Fox News, where Canada is, for this last week, top of the news for several days at times. So it's a fascinating dynamic going on down here.
Yeah, it sure is. Actually, Trudeau often makes their newscast as well with some of the things that he does and says. Speaking of Trudeau, okay, now here we go on the 51st state thing. So I thought we were kind of over this thing, but it looks like there was allegedly audio that came out last week of Justin Trudeau saying that Donald Trump is serious about making Canada the 51st state. So the claim is that it was a hot mic moment that wasn't supposed to be made public. But Brian, you think Trudeau wanted this audio out there. Why do you think that?
Oh, as soon as I heard it on Friday, I said this was leaked on purpose. They didn't cut the mic. So the media was invited into this event in Toronto. It was a bunch of business people. They're calling it the Team Canada event. And they're brainstorming and discussing ways to push back. And the media was allowed in for the first few minutes for Trudeau's opening comments, which sounded a lot like a TED Talk. And then after the media left, well, he started talking and they hadn't cut the mic. I think that he did this on purpose. My podcast this week on Full Comment, I interviewed Joel Pollack from Breitbart just after that news broke. And Joel even thought, yeah, this is probably strategy on Trudeau's part. I mean, it can be political strategy in terms of how he plays it up for the Liberals to try and say, look, nasty Donald Trump's coming for us and we're going to fight against him and we're against him and others aren't. But there's also strategy in terms of how Canada negotiates with the White House over this. So, I think he wanted it out there, and I think it served him politically to have it out there.
Interesting. Okay, so you think Trudeau says that, Donald Trump is serious about making Canada the 51st state. So what does Trump, the man himself, have to say about this?
His Fox News interview just ahead of the Super Bowl on Sunday, he was asked about it. Brett Baer said he cited Trudeau's hot mic moment and said, is this serious? And Trump said, yes, it is, and then started going into why he wants Canada to become the 51st state. He talked about a trade imbalance. He's still claiming that, the Americans subsidizes to the tune of $200 billion. Well, one, the trade surplus isn't that big. Also, a trade surplus is not a subsidy. But, as I've been reading into the people around him and who are advising them, they do view the defense spending that they do and that we don't do as a subsidy. Trump was asked about this again on his flight to New Orleans for the Super Bowl and went on at length about how, Canada hasn't spent much on defense because they assumed that we would defend them. Well, they can't make that assumption anymore, and we're not going to spend that money, but if you're a state, then we'll defend you. But if not, you're going to pay. So essentially, that's part of his thinking on tariffs. His thinking on tariffs is muddled and all over the place. I thought we were getting a 30-day reprieve, but that's part of what's going on there. So, I think all of this started as a joke. I don't think it's a joke anymore. The bad part is I don't know where it goes from here, Jeanette.
Yeah, I know. Is it something we should be serious or be, taking action against? Just wait and see. Trump is so unpredictable, and it's difficult to know if he's being serious or not, or if he's joking. So, or maybe it's a negotiating tactic. Who knows? So, what is your sense of all of this, Brian? Are you just as confused as everybody else about this one?
Well, it's definitely part of a negotiation tactic, but, I've had the sense for a little while that when this started with Justin Trudeau's trip to Mar-a-Lago at the end of November, remember Trump put out the social media post on the Monday night, November 25th, saying that Canada and Mexico would get these 25% tariffs. Trudeau was in Mar-a-Lago that Friday night. It was a surprise visit, had dinner, left the next day. And it was after that that the reporting started that Trump had said at that dinner, we'll make you the 51st state. I thought, okay, he doesn't like Justin Trudeau. And then all of his social media posts with the "Oh Canada" and looking out at the Matterhorn and all of that, I thought he's just trying to get under Trudeau's skin because the two guys do not like each other and they've battled over the years. But I think some point in December, Trump's thinking started to change, and I think he is leaning towards this would be a good idea. I think it relates to Arctic sovereignty, Arctic security, our natural resources. It's utterly bizarre that on the one hand he says we don't have anything that they need, and so he can just cut us off. And on the other hand, if he talks about us being the 51st state, he says think of how beautiful the country would be. Think of all the resources we would have. So I think he wouldn't mind absorbing Canada into the United States. And that's the word he's using now. He's not talking about invading, but he started to use the word absorb. It would be a nice gentle merger. Polling shows most Canadians aren't for it. Unfortunately, most of the surge in Canadian national pride lately seems to be based on hating Donald Trump rather than national pride, because a little while ago, national pride we saw from polling and trying to cancel Canada Day and take statues down and names down, that was all driven by people who didn't have pride in the country. And now they have pride, but because of Donald Trump. It's a bizarre notion to me.
My goodness. Okay, well, as we all know, beginning of March, those 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum take effect, and that's right around the time that we could see more tariffs that Trump says are related to the border, and then there is possibly another batch of tariffs down the road. So it doesn't look like much of a reprieve for Canada, does it?
No reprieve at all. So, we were told Inauguration Day would be 25% across the board tariffs. That didn't happen. Then we were told they're coming February 1st. And then we got a reprieve. He announced that they would, on February 1st, he signed the order, said they'd come in February 4th. Then he gave a reprieve, said at least 30 days. And then a week later announces 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum. But these other ones on absolutely everything could come back. And then there's the sectoral ones. I think Premier Ford put it best. The only certainty with Donald Trump is uncertainty. And this is part of his negotiation tactics. Keep you off balance so that you don't know what to say or do because you don't know what's coming next. We are, in a pretty bad spot at the moment when it comes to this because we are so reliant on the American economy. 76% of our exports go to one market. Be awful good if we had that Northern Gateway pipeline and maybe Energy East and Energy Saguenay and all these other projects approved at this point. We'd be far less reliant. It would still hurt, but we'd have a more resilient, diversified economy. Instead, we've spent 10 years trying to shut down our economy and just coasting on our relationship with the Americans.
Now, Ryan, you've been writing about Trump's tariffs and the potential impact on our economy, but you also say our own domestic policies can be job killers and we should worry about them as well. So what do you mean by that exactly?
Well, canceling Northern Gateway, not approving Energy East, passing Bill C-69. I know Liberals like to say, oh no, the Trudeau government didn't kill Energy East. The company said it wasn't economically viable. Well, why wasn't it economically viable after years and years of work? Quite simply, it's because the government put too many roadblocks in the way. They made it unpalatable for the company. They gave Quebec social license. They said you will have to account for upstream and downstream emissions, something no pipeline had ever had to do. They changed the rules time and again. And then once that was gone, they passed Bill C-69. You look at what Mark Carney's trying to bring in. He announced that he's going to get rid of the consumer carbon tax. But then he said he will increase the price and tighten up the regulations around the industrial carbon tax. Who will that apply to? The steel industry? The aluminum industry? And do you think that's going to hurt jobs? Do you think it's going to make it easier for the steel plant up in Edmonton or the one in Regina or the two in Hamilton, in Sault Ste. Marie or just south of Montreal? You think it's going to be easier for them to keep going? This is going to kill jobs as well. And then he wants to put on a carbon tax at the border, a carbon tariff. What will the reaction be here in Washington if the Canadian government, and Mark Carney's going to sail to the Liberal leadership and become PM, if the Canadian government suddenly says, your climate plan's not good enough, so we're slapping a tariff on everything we import from you related to climate. On the one hand, we're saying, get rid of these tariffs, they're going to kill our jobs. On the other hand, you want to put one on for climate and increase the taxes on the very industries you're now trying to say you want to save. It makes no sense. Absolutely no sense. But some Canadians seem to think it's fine if a Canadian government tries to destroy our industries, but it's bad if an American government does. I think it's bad for both.
Yeah, interesting. Now, you mentioned pipelines earlier. We've seen over the past several weeks, many Liberals speak about how we possibly do need pipelines. After all, going to Tidewater and pipelines going across the country from west to east. But the Trudeau Liberals aren't fully there with embracing that whole oil industry, are they?
No, they're really not. I mean, they've spent the last decade trying to kill it off. I don't think that we can believe that they're trying to revive it at this point. They're saying lots of nice words, but if you brought in the tanker ban on the West Coast, if you brought in C-69, if you brought in the just transition, the emissions caps, go on and on and on. Are you really the person that is going to be believable in terms of saving this industry now and having a conversion on the road to Damascus? I'm not believing your conversion. No, I think it's false. I think you're saying nice words because you want to try and get reelected.
Okay. We're out of time here, but Brian, thanks so much for joining me today and enjoy your time in Washington.
Thank you.
Well, from alcohol and drug addictions to life's hurts and pains, the reality is most of us know someone, whether it's a friend, a coworker, a relative, or anyone who struggles with this. Some do find help through the medical system, some never find help at all, and others find a spiritual solution. Joining us from Lethbridge to discuss this is Patty Bidevat, ministry leader with Celebrate Recovery. Patty, welcome to Bridge City News. Great to have you on today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this.
Absolutely. Okay, so maybe give us a bit of an overview of what Celebrate Recovery is all about.
Well, Celebrate Recovery is about finding freedom from our hurts, hangups, and habits of any kind. Most of us in life have been hurt in some way or another. And some people think that this is just for people with addictions, but it really truly isn't. We've all had hurts or hurt somebody at some point. And so we get freedom through Christ, and this is long-lasting true freedom.
Okay, and you meet in Lethbridge, right? So where and when do you guys meet?
We meet on Friday evenings at 7 p.m. at the Park Meadows Baptist Church, and the last Friday of the month, though, we start at 6 o'clock because we have a pizza supper, and then it's a special Friday evening that it's a celebration. So Celebrate Recovery, we celebrate.
Okay, now you mentioned the church there. Now, are people who aren't involved in any church or even non-Christians welcome to attend as well?
Everyone is welcome to attend. We welcome with open arms anybody, and we are glad to see new faces. And it is growing. It is ministering to Christians or non-Christians, and it's a great program for absolutely everyone, men and women, anybody above the age of 18.
Wow. Okay. And so you say that the program, it's not just for people who are struggling with drug and alcohol, but for a wide variety of hurts, right? Or habits or hangups. How do you help those people? Maybe explain that a little bit.
Absolutely. It is for a wide variety of hurts, hangups, or habits. Some of us, some people have issues with codependency, or maybe there might be other addictions like shopping addiction or food addiction, um, or just simply been hurt and are struggling with maybe some anxiety or depression, and just need some support from a loving group of people that love God and love each other and just want to help one another in finding this true freedom. And this is it's a part of what God has brought into my life and many people's lives around the world. And so yeah, it's for absolutely anybody.
Yeah. And a lot of those hangups sound like things that many of us can relate to as well. I mean, we all get anxiety at sometimes, the shopping addiction, I can totally
Yeah.
relate to that as well. And
Yes.
yeah, I'm sure you see it in various degrees to the point where people
Yes.
need help. So it's almost like a 12-step program though, right? Where kind of similar to Alcoholics Anonymous. So what would the key differences be?
Well, it is very similar to the 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I have not been involved with Alcoholics Anonymous, so I'm not familiar at all. But from what I've heard, and that's where it originated, John Baker from California was very involved. He's passed away last year, but he started at Alcoholics Anonymous, and then he was wanting to do something that was Christ centered. And so he talked to the pastor of his church, Rick Warren, and that's where it all started. Rick Warren just said, "Okay, this is your ministry, go with it." And so it's biblical based. The 12 steps approach is from the Beatitudes, from the book of Matthew. And so it's very, set up the similar to Alcoholics Anonymous. We also have 8 principles. Uh, and so it's really set up well according to how God wants us to be able to truly find freedom, and not as the world sees it. But yeah, yeah, it's great.
interesting. It's interesting that it was started by the same person who started Alcoholics Anonymous, or AA, as it's more commonly known. And it sounds almost like he wanted to kind of make it a little bit more spiritual. Like AA is spiritual. They talk about your higher power, but it sounds more like he really wanted to hone in on that sort of Christian angle. Is that kind of what I'm getting from that?
Yes,
Mhm.
exactly. He went to church there at Saddleback in California, and there was no Christ-based program to help people with addictions, and he had an addiction, and so he was searching, and so then he wrote up this. Uh, yeah, a paper to the pastor wanting to start a ministry. And yeah, Rick Warren just said, go with it. Yeah, it's blessed by God. And yeah, it's in every country around the world. It's a huge ministry, and it is really, truly helping many, many people. And me personally, it has helped me as I have been hurt in my past. And so I came just, yeah, seeking help because I was struggling with some anxiety and depression. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And I guess you turn around and now you're leading that group, right?
Yes.
That's
Yes.
amazing. So what kinds of
What
things would take place in a typical meeting? Maybe walk us through that a little bit.
Right. So at the beginning of the meeting, we have two main parts, and then at the end we can just get together for coffee and snacks at the very end after 9 o'clock. But the first hour between 7 and 8 o'clock is a large group, and people come and we sing some worship songs, and we go through and say the either the 12 principles or the 8 steps, and we listen to either one week we listen to a lesson by Johnny Baker or somebody else. Um, Sometimes it's online, but so yeah, that's how that is taught. But every other week, then we do a testimony, and we are trying actually to once a month have a live testimony. So some of our leaders have written up their testimonies, and we'll share them in person, which is very powerful.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
so that's great. But otherwise, we have testimonies that we have access to online. And so the large group will meet and listen to that. Then the men and the women between 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock divide into separate groups, men and women. And then they are welcome to openly share something that touched them about the testimony, or what was important that they could glean from the lesson, and just digging deeper. And also then there's a time of prayer where we can pray for one another. So it's such a blessed evening, and it's such amazing people coming together to um, just support one
Are
another. And
people required to share their own struggles at these meetings, or is it more of a like when you see fit, you can open up about it, you can sit there and just take it all in, you don't have to necessarily share?
right. At the beginning, many of us are nervous to share, and
Mhm.
so there is no requirement to share at all. Only when you are ready, you can share, and where God leads and how He leads. And yeah, at the beginning, a lot of people don't share, and that's okay. Come and listen. Come and just be a part. Build relationships. Connect with other women or men, and just yeah, over
Sure.
time,
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm
as the
just
heart leads.
curious, when people are addicted to a substance, or if they have a lot of that hurt that they're holding on to, how long does it take to recover from that? I know it would vary definitely from person to person, but is there kind of an average timeline that you're looking at?
Well, I'm not sure about an average timeline because a lot of people's addictions are different. We are not counselors, or we don't do counselor referrals. But some people do come after they've been either in a treatment, or sometimes they come before they've been in treatment and then they realize that maybe they should go for treatment. So it definitely varies. I don't know if there is a, an average time line, but for every person, it all depends on how serious you are and how diligent you want to dig into your
Sure. Yeah,
healing
no, that
and
makes sense.
your journey.
Are there any particular keys to breaking an addiction?
Um, there is ultimately giving it to God. God really leads, and so that's a huge thing. Connecting with other people that attend and finding that support when you are struggling. We freely can share our cell phone numbers, or communicate with people on Friday nights. After the Friday nights, um, the men have started something on a separate night called Step Studies, which digs deeper through some actual work and whatnot. And it's usually about a year long. The women are going to be starting shortly for these step studies. And so it's a separate day of the week. And you dig deeper, but you also connect more deeper on those during those step studies. So that's a separate, other than Friday nights. And so that, depending on how deep a person and how diligently a person is working on that, will be how quickly and how soon you will find that some true freedom.
Sure. And of course, we are human beings, and obviously people have relapses. So what happens when a person relapses? What's the plan for that? And how often does that tend to happen?
You know, for every person, it's different, and a relapse can happen sometimes even at the beginning, one every other week or every week or whatever. Sometimes, whatever, like it can happen. And there is some of the lessons are geared to relapse. So there is one of the lessons called relapse, and it really helps us be aware that relapse is possible, and if it does happen, what we can do. And what we can do is just keep going.
It looks like we're out of time here, Patty, but thanks so much for being with us today. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for highlighting this awesome ministry, what God has done. Yeah, He's just continuing.
Patty Bidevat is a ministry leader with Celebrate Recovery. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks so much for watching.